Yesterday was the fifth week of Donald J. Trump's presidency, and we're going to highlight for you today four key areas of the revolution occurring in the last week. As we've said before, change is happening at a speed which can make you dizzy, particularly if you're holding on to your former beliefs and axiomatic assumptions about how the world works. If you are a pessimist or a modern Democrat or a paid scribe for the corporate media or even a well-intentioned pundit, you are spinning like a broken top, trying to right yourself by throwing out endless wild theories about how Donald Trump is about to fail. But yesterday's polls showed he has won over the American people, and they fully support what is happening. After all, they voted for it. His internal polling, the most accurate, shows the highest approval rating of any Republican president ever. This is Barbara Boyd, and this is your Saturday wrap for the week. We'll look at War and Peace. We'll look at President Trump's fight to use the Constitution to increase the powers of the president at the expense of the constitutionally illicit fourth branch of government, the so-called independent administrative agencies, including, by the way, the Federal Reserve. We'll look at developments in the science of highest forms of energy, which will define our future, and developments in Trump's campaign to dismantle the corrupt military-industrial complex, commonly known as the MEC. Now, as most of you know, the press has been filled all week with moans and groans and hysterical screams from the corporate media about how Trump is the new Neville Chamberlain, appeasing the bloodthirsty dictator Putin, and therefore feeding a monster who will destroy the Western world. That's their take on Trump's determination to end the British-inspired war against Russia using the proxy nation of Ukraine. To be blunt, all this media hose of lies is British imperial BS. They can't come up with a modern narrative that actually fits reality, so they keep resorting to their cartoonish, fake, and infantile version of World War II. The British have sought to use the sad geopolitical location of Ukraine since World War II to wage war against Russia. Because we have allowed them to erase much of our history in the schools, Americans have played the fool in this so-called great game. In January, just 4 days before President Trump's inauguration, the British signed a 100-year treaty with Ukraine to keep the war going, to Trump-proof the war, and to develop Ukraine's gas, oil, and rare earth minerals as their booty. In addition to sending Labor Party operatives here to campaign against Trump in the election, instigating the coup against the first Trump presidency, and many, many other crimes, they sought to thwart the will of the American people who voted to end this genocidal war. The Brits instigated this war, which has destroyed Ukraine, killed millions needlessly by using the senile Joe Biden with all his pent-up senile rage against Putin as an open piggy bank. Just like Barack Obama funded al-Qaeda in Syria to overthrow Assad, Biden and the media promoted open neo-Nazis as their main enforcement force against the population of Ukraine. This Banderist movement has been a British intelligence asset ever since World War II. Next week, both Prime Minister Starmer of Britain and President Macron of France will be coming to Washington to plead with Trump to reverse course. They will be aided by a media blitz set up and run by the Washington PR firms who are paid for by the Ukrainian diaspora lobby in the U.S., a powerful force within Republican politics since the Reagan administration. So expect even more British BS from our controlled media next week. But Trump is holding firm. He wants the killing to end. He is trying to claw back the billions Biden gave away by securing Ukraine's rare earth minerals as collateral for the blood money billions Biden spent. Note, that's the same thing the British want in their treaty, access to the rare earth minerals, So that tug of war is really not about Zelensky and Ukraine, but about the Brits versus Donald Trump and the people of the United States. Zelensky has been told either agree to a deal for security on the money we gave you and hold elections and make peace, or move to France immediately because peace will be at hand one way or the other. We are going to make a deal for security in Europe which benefits the US and Russians primarily. Those who have no sovereignty, the European governments, which have been British imperial pawns since the 1992 Maastricht Treaty, which set up Brussels and the European Union, will have a very limited role. We here at Promethean Action believe that a larger and more important dynamic is at work in what Trump is doing. An agreement between Russia, China, India, and the US to promote peace in all of the world's hotspots and collaborate on joint areas of interest in developing the economics of the world. Areas of interest like conquering space and conquering energy on behalf of the poor of the world. Lyndon LaRouche had insisted that these four nations held the economic potential to overcome the far-flung British monetarist empire of central banks and endless wars once and for all. Tonight, Will Wirtz will give his second class on developments of this potential over at Promethean Path. Watch it and fight for this vision. It holds the key to a durable peace and a prosperous future. Now, we know how corrupt Zelensky and his oligarch sponsors are. They have sold U.S. weapons on the open market to the drug cartels and terrorists, gotten rich off the needless slaughter of their own people, and run a totalitarian state under martial law, which has even shut down the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and invented a wholly new one, a religion consistent with the present government and British imperial policies. That's what we're so-called fighting for when we say we're fighting for democracy in Ukraine. Zelensky is loved by certain senators and congressmen because he plays in the same corrupt field they do. They see him as one of their own. Sunlight here will slay the reputations of figures in very high places and probably put them in prison. Hence, the very intense heat around the very sound idea of making peace. In Israel, the Trump-negotiated ceasefire will face challenges this week after the very rocky first phase of the deal comes to an end. Both the terrorist Hamas and the desperate Netanyahu government have tried every way possible to blow up the deal and continue the destruction. The Arab states just finished a meeting in Saudi Arabia and will present next week their alternative to Trump's plan concerning the rebuilding of Gaza. So we're watching developments closely there. The final big ingredient in this strategic mix is the German elections occurring today. Establishment polling says the CDU will hold off the populist, anti-open borders, anti-war, anti-green AfD, but that party will gain hugely. The German government has said that if the AfD were to win the election or do representation in the government, they will somehow ban them, prevent that. That's the state of democracy in Europe right now, and why J.D. Vance gave them such a tongue lashing at the Munich Security Conference last week. Now, with respect to repurposing the bloated and corrupt federal government, Trump signed an executive order last week which asserts that all the so-called independent agencies set up by the Congress have to report to the president to ensure that they are acting in concert with the head of the executive branch, which is where they exist. The head of the executive branch is, of course, the President of the United States. The Trump administration planned out this challenge to what many call an unconstitutional fourth branch of so-called experts running things well before taking office. They are deliberately provoking a legal fight at the level of the Supreme Court in order to force the Congress to take back much of its constitutional power instead of delegating it to these agencies. That includes the power of the purse, by the way, the Federal Reserve, as the Constitution requires that exercise by Congress, while giving the president the power to use these agencies to the extent they are needed to implement his policies. At the same time, they're auditing all the major government departments on behalf of the American people and publishing their findings about billions and billions of waste, fraud, and abuse. Since the corporate media have been funded heavily by such institutions as USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, which Trump just canceled, and other government cutout think tanks, they are screaming bloody murder. Similarly, the American Catholic Church has received huge funding from facilitating the scam around trafficking slave labor into the country. They, too, a substantial lobby, are screaming. Don't believe a word you read about any of this in the media. They are seeing their livelihoods beginning to disappear, and that is the source of their despair. Why they're calling Trump a king, a dictator, without the power he is now exercising. Now, as Trump has emphasized, ramping up our energy production to fuel a modern manufacturing and industrial economy is the key to our economic salvation. We have to produce our way out of the debt prison the policies of the modern British financial empire have put us in. The policies of net zero carbon and the Green New Deal, rent rather than ownership, outsourcing of every productive capacity to cheap labor here or abroad, a constant 2% or more inflation rate to bail out speculative financial failures dating from the financial collapse of 2008. Chris Wright, the new Secretary of Energy, gave a very important speech this week in which he emphasized that our future lies in high-temperature processed heat and materials production from it, new materials. These energy densities can only be assured through nuclear power and ultimately fusion energy. As a side note, Vladimir Putin says the same principles govern their new hypersonic missile capacity. These missiles reach heat intensities mimicking the sun and, accordingly, the destructive potential of a hydrogen bomb. Our journey of discovery here will revolutionize all our manufacturing and technological processes, even more than artificial intelligence, and makes the future look endlessly exciting. Now, Wright gave his speech to people gathered in London. He called the green energy campaign sponsored by the British organized insanity, a sinister plot which had resulted in the total collapse of European industry, particularly the once proud and technologically progressive German economy. Finally, Kash Patel was confirmed by the Senate this week, and his acceptance speech was truly inspiring. You can watch it. He is authentic, the real deal. He has been put through hell because he discovered where the bodies were buried in the coup against Donald Trump's first presidency through the use of his investigative skills and creative imagination. On the same day, yesterday, AG Pam Bondi announced that she had the Jeffrey Epstein client list on her desk ready for declassification and is also reviewing the JFK, RFK, and MLK assassination papers, which are also on her desk. We expect big developments on the declassification front over the next days. So we're 3 for 3 on the big change agents who everybody predicted could not get through Washington's corrupt morass: Kash, RFK Jr., and Tulsi Gabbard. The American people mobilized to get them through a hostile Senate, just like they did on November 5th to elect a revolutionary president. Last night, Trump fired the head of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown, and replaced him with the man who defeated ISIS, Lieutenant General Dan Raisin Kane. He is also going to remove the corrupt career generals at the top of the Pentagon in the coming weeks and replace them with people who will concentrate on maximum defense of our country rather than their future careers at the Big Five defense contractors. So here we are. The key here is to keep moving as fast as Trump is moving, not giving the enemy a chance to regroup. Tune in tonight to Will's class and you'll get a glimpse of what wonderful future can await humanity if we consolidate this movement and raise it to its highest potential. That's what we here at Promethean Action are all about. Be Promethean, Join us. Go to Promethean Action and become a member. And I'll see you again on Monday for the Monday Brief.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.